turn our attention to the global fight against Ebola. Now, there are new signs of progress in Liberia, one of the countries hit hard by the outbreak. Officials plan to reopen schools there next month that were closed back in July, part of the effort to contain the deadly virus. Now, more people have died of Ebola in Liberia than anywhere else. The country has seen a recent decrease in the number of cases. In fact, the World Health Organization counts more than 8,000 deaths and nearly 21,000 confirmed or suspected cases of Ebola in West Africa. Now, right now, the new head of the United Nations Ebola mission is visiting those affected countries. He took over the work from Anthony Banbury, who joins us now live from CNN New York. And Anthony, thank you for joining us here on CNN International. You recently completed a 6-day tour of the Ebola-affected region in Africa, including Liberia. Were you encouraged by what you saw there?
I was encouraged by a lot of what I saw. That was the 6th trip I'd made in the last 3 months throughout the region, and every trip we saw a little more progress being made. We saw improved situation on the ground, more response capabilities being deployed. We were far behind this disease when we first deployed. It had a big head start. I think we've caught up. We're ahead of it now, and we're making good progress.
Have you caught up in the remote areas as well? I understand you went to the remote areas while visiting Africa. Did you see enough treatment centers there, enough burial teams, or is more help needed?
We do have enough treatment centers on the ground. We do have enough burial teams, but you're absolutely right. The challenge going forward is the remote areas. To defeat this disease, we need to be present throughout Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. We need to be able to have an early detection capability for when there are just a few cases. We know about them early, and we need to be able to respond quickly. If we're able to do that, we can shut it down. The problem is now, in some rural areas, a few cases become 20 cases, become 40 cases, and that's what we have to avoid.
Yeah, a few cases can become many cases, and you've said the only option here is to get to 0 cases. How do we get to 0 cases?
It's going to be hard. It really is. There's no doubt about it. But we have to do it. Any other option is just not acceptable. The costs in human lives, to the economies, to the education system that you were referring to a moment ago would be just far too great. The way to do it is have very strong disease surveillance capability built into the national systems across the 3 countries, and then that ability to respond very quickly. These governments are going to need some strong international support going forward, no doubt about it, but we have to help them build their own national health systems so that they will be able to not just for this crisis shut it down whenever there's a small little outbreak, but when this is all over, we have to make sure we never have a repeat and that the national health systems are able to detect diseases quickly, respond quickly.
And when will it all be over? When will the Ebola outbreak end? And could it end this year in 2015?
The UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon was also just out in the region, and he gave us very clear marching orders that we need to have a short-term perspective, not a medium-term one. He wants it over in 2015. I think it can be done. I think it should be done. The world needs to invest the resources necessary to make it happen. The United Nations is doing that. We've had a big mobilization on the part of the UN, but also other partners like United States, Cuba, African Union, China. Many are responding. I believe we'll shut it down in 2015.
And as the former head of the UN's Ebola mission, what memory of the outbreak will always stay with you?
There are so many, but 2 really stick out in my mind. One was visiting an Ebola treatment unit in rural Sierra Leone. It was very well run by the International Federation of the Red Cross. Behind it, though, was a cemetery that I visited, and there were a number of freshly dug graves with headstones, names of people who had died, their ages. But what was even more difficult were the empty graves. They had been dug, and they were waiting for people from that center who were not going to survive. And that conveyed just the huge responsibility we as the United Nations and responders had to make sure we could end the disease as quickly as possible, prevent more graves from having to be dug. Much more encouraging, though, just a few days ago when I was in rural Liberia in a place called Senequale up by the Guinea border, I met a young girl named Esther who was a survivor, a 10-year-old girl. She had lost her father, she had lost some siblings, but she was just so full of spark and life and energy, and it was so encouraging to see that with the right treatment, with a big response, we can help people like Esther, but also prevent more people like her schoolmates or village neighbors from catching this disease. So it's inspiring work that we're doing, but it's also work with a lot of responsibility, and we have to do it well, and we have to do it fast.
And our viewers around the world can watch that inspiring video of Esther off of the UN Mir website. I saw it off of twitter.com/UNMir, your YouTube channel as well. Very inspiring. She says in English, I survived, I lived. Anthony Banbury will leave it at that. Thank you so much for your work and for your efforts. The Ebola outbreak must stop for the sake of Africa and our shared humanity. Thank you for joining us here on CNN, and take care.
Thank you very much.
You're watching Newsstream, and still to come on the program, we have a CNN exclusive. We take you to the front line. The Syrian rebels launch a surprise attack on government forces.